Hey everyone, and welcome to a brand new video. Tonight we have 2 hours of horror stories as per usual. I hope you all enjoy them. If you do, please be sure to drop a like rating. Let's try and go for a very high like goal on this one. Let's see if we can reach 1,300 likes. I think if everyone took just a quick second, we could definitely do it. Subscribing if you are new is also very much appreciated, as I post content just like this. Hopefully a lot more often than I have been. But yeah, I've been getting back into the groove of things. Lately I've been getting a lot more into a lot of my old hobbies. I've been playing a lot of Magic, I got back into BMX, and staying up late at night and recording these horror stories is definitely the cherry on top. I love recording these stories for all of you, so thank you to everyone who is still here listening along. I very much hope that you enjoy this video. Sit back, grab a coffee, pack a bowl, whatever it is that you do to relax. Enjoy the video, tell someone you love them, and as always, I hope you all have a great night. Something mauled a kid. I don't know what it was. Still don't, to be honest with you. What I do know is I'll be dealing with this until the day I die. I got the call a few months ago in the fall. I'm a park ranger, and while the brighter side of the job has you talking to happy families, helping send the wildlife back to areas safe from harm, there's a lot of this career that can take a toll on you. This was one of them. I pulled into a clearing of a forest in New Hampshire. White pines and firs as far as the eye can see. Autumn made the hue of leaves turn to a carnival of colors as red maples glowed in the sunlight of midday. It was walks like these that made me take this job in the first place. I even wanted to be a park ranger when I was a child. Back when I thought all you did was get lost in the woods, hanging out with bears, stealing baskets. It had a way of making you forget it all. Taking in the view almost made me forget what I was heading towards. The crime scene was at the end of a rocky ravine. Trickles of water spattered on the floor, a backdrop of the poor kid covered in a bloody tarp. I'll spare you the details, but I saw the photos sent for the report, even saw the boy myself. It was awful. Whatever did this ate its fair share. Everything not consumed came in tears with ill intent, scattering his remains around the woods. The animal must have taken its time shredding him to pieces. If there is a God, I hope that boy died quickly. The more I read from the coroner's report, however, the less I think it's likely. The parents were there to identify the body. The mother's screams seeing her child like this could be heard for miles. It sounded like gutting her alive was preferable to the pain she suffered now. Ugly crying with snot dripping as a dutiful husband stood by, him using whatever strength he had left to hold her up, back from grabbing the pieces of her boy. Federal officers came in to assist us. All of us there were doing the best we could to ignore her screams of agony and get to work. Photos, collecting evidence, and the like. Believe it or not, people think we don't care. Unfortunately, most of us do. I even know how easy it would be for it to be your nephew or brother in that spot. Seeing his face ripped on the floor, it can keep you up at night. It doesn't matter though. The parents crying would be far more distraught if they saw you weeping too. So you bite your lip, smoke, have a quick cry in the car when no one's looking. Otherwise, you just get back to work. In the middle of the commotion, I saw my old boss. He's an older man, stone-cut face from the wind over years of hiking. A stocky build with broad shoulders, yet held by the hunched, curving spine of a man who could say he was too old for this. The potbelly earned from long hours looking over files at the local diner hung over his trousers. Longer hours were spent drinking a fifth in his car to keep the nightmares away. He looked over the scene with that gravelly face deep in thought. "O'Connell." I waved him down, stepping around the photographers and family to reach him. "Jameson, good to see you." He gave me a nod and turned away from the scene. I followed after, as it was clear he had something to tell me, away from the mourning couple near. There was something to show me as well. He pulled a manila folder from his wool-lined jacket and handed it to me. "Looks like you're moving up in the world. This your jurisdiction now?" "Yep, just moved me over to Hillsborough." "What are you doing over here? I thought you worked back in Concord." I took the folder from his hand. I had a hunch of what was in it, and I wasn't looking until he asked me to. "I do. A long time ago, this was where I started. Back when you could have a beer at lunch and nobody would bat an eye. I got a call about the situation and I knew I had to come. This isn't the first time a kid's been taken." I opened the folder, and sure enough, there it was. Black and white photos of missing children in the woods, ripped to pieces, entrails strung among the trees, viscera which even in the faded ink was enough to make you sick. My old boss continued. "We've taken trips to find it. No one's gotten a confirmed sight of the thing, let alone a kill. Sent 30 men, 50 yards apart with enough ammo to put down an elephant. All we got was 2 casualties and a scream that still gives me nightmares. The old folks thought it was some kind of demon, a curse on the white man for what our ancestors did to the natives when he sent them on the Trail of Tears. Can't say I blame them. I've seen how they live out west. We shipped blankets full of smallpox and slaughter. They send us a monster in return." "You sound like you believe it." I tried to joke, yet any humor fell flat on the stone face that glared with the knowing tired. He stepped closer, pointing at the photos, staring into my soul unblinking. "I had to bury those children. Put on the rubber gloves to pick up the bits. Parents didn't have the stomach for it and couldn't afford a coffin. The fear in those dead eyes haunt me in my dreams. Now, if you don't want to do the same, here's what I recommend." He gave me a list of instructions, the mother sobbing behind us now turning to an exhausted whimper. My pickup drove deep in the woods in wake of a setting sun. The camper shell and some tie-downs kept the load I was hauling, as even then it bounced while I drove down the beaten trail. The further I went, the less it looked like a road at all. First it was a lane, then it was a footpath, then there was none at all. I hopped out of my vehicle as the sky turned from crimson to a cool blue, the last vestiges of light shimmering in the trees. I thought I was lost despite following his directions with certainty. 50 miles off the highway, you follow the runner's trail. When it ends, take a look around. If the woods are ready for you, they'll make room. I didn't know what he was talking about. Anyone else would have written him off as a loon. He trained me well, however. Back when I was fresh out of high school kicking myself over a girl, he showed me the trails, taught me all the rules, even showed me how to shoot. My father died in the desert back in Iraq. This old man was closest thing to a dad I had. All in all, I owed him a little faith. I looked back at the gifts he left in my front seat, a pack of smokes and a flask with a small note unfolded. Reading it over again, I felt a mix of pride and pity emanating from his words. "I'd go with you, kid, but I'm too old. Seen too many corpses of my own. Just do exactly as I told you, and you'll be all right. Help yourself to these when you're done. Congratulations, kid. You're going to need them." I looked around, playing with the pack of smokes. I flipped the lucky cigarette upside down, like my uncle used to show me when I was a kid. Third from the left. We all know smoking is terrible for you. Even so, it's funny the things that old men leave to those behind them. I looked up, just about to head back, thinking this was for nothing. Sure enough, however, I found what he was after. The thicket in front of me, a wall of saplings and branches, now had a break. It started small, yet as the sun went down and wind began to swell, the branches creaking as they gave away with all manner of twists and turns. It started slow enough you would have mistaken it for just the wind. In minutes, however, the way was clear. The very grass and weeds lay down along the path, inviting me further in. I hopped back in my truck and drove slow. I barely pressed the gas as the clearing squeaked inside. I always heard the forest was alive, a great organism among the cells of bark and pine. I thought him drunk, yet the old man was right. The woods made way to let me in. At the end of the path I found a clearing hid from civilization. There in my high beams was a cement flight of stairs. No debris from a house undone, no foundation to explain it being there. A lone flight of stone steps trailed with an iron banister, curling into the night above. The steps ended sharp as they reached into the sky, broken beams of iron pointing the curled fingers to the stars glimmering high above. The air had a severance to it, like stepping before an ancient temple. My hands shook as I stood before the stairway. Nothing prepared me for what I'd gotten into, and yet keeping my composure, I walked around to open up the back. A corpse of a whole pig lay stretched across the truck bed. Its stomach hung open in flaps, gutted as its blood seeped into the tarp below. With all the strength I could muster, I pulled on the tarp as it slid across the bed of my vehicle. It took 5 minutes before my efforts answered with the heavy thump of the carcass landing in the woods. Thank God the stink was minimal, the heat from the vehicle only beginning to let it turn. I dragged it still further before the steps, those stairs drawing me in with a strange magnetism, inviting to see them more as the contrast of that cold stone was so stark to the woods around. Without thinking, my hands even reached for it. Yet the old man's words echoed in my head back from when I started. He was half drunk on a night watch for poachers back then. Me too green to find it odd or even care. When he drank, the demons would come to haunt him, or maybe they haunted him still, the man only drawing from his flask to numb their fingers on his shoulders. In one of his rants he told me plain, if you ever see a flight of steps here, don't even think of touching them. You'll never leave the woods alive. He pulled deep from the very flask now sitting in my car, muttering to himself, I'm sorry, Phil. I shouldn't have left you there to die. I never questioned it then. Now I saw everything with a cold certainty. I snapped back to my senses, pulling my hand away. I climbed in my truck, headlights glaring over the pig carcass before stairs that felt more like an ancient altar. I should have left like I was told. Leave the pig in front and don't come back till winter. Those were my instructions. That dead kid was still inside my mind, however. The sad look in my friend's face as remorse weighed on his soul. I wanted to give those parents peace. Every one of them. My hands gripped firm the weight of a cold iron. A black and gold revolver, with caliber large enough to kill a bear. I waited for that predator to snap at my bait. Sure, I was the one to put him down. I turned off my engine, quiet to lure him in. For an hour I rolled my thumb along the chamber of that gun, waiting for the revenge I would take for all the murders it left behind. So sure that I would be their avenger, certain that my act was one of justice and not of pride. It's funny. I only ever shot that thing at cans. The loudest scream I ever heard shattered the glass around me. My alarm blared, filling those woods with the chaos that ensued. I screamed, covered in the broken bits of my windshield, but I did not run away. I did not cry or cower. Terrified still, my actions were that of pure adrenaline. Stepping out of the safety of my vehicle, I screamed into the night, raising my firearm, blind and deaf to all that ensued. I had no idea where it came from, yet I fired that pistol in those woods, again and again and again. Smoke from the burning powder filled my nostrils. Flash from a hot barrel, blinding as echo and recoil had me stumble. My ears rang as the blasts mixed with the siren now behind me. I fired until my chamber went dry, and that was when it hit me. I turned to see an open hand of black across my face. Its claw wisped like smoke and shadow, its color making even the night around us look bright in its comparison. The heavy thump of its strike knocked me down as though I'd been a child. My skull cracked against the ground and all went black around me. When I awoke, there was blood across my eyes. Everything hurt as the world spun in my concussion. I reached for my face out of instinct as its painful sting awoke me. My fingers felt wet meat, dripping with crusted blood. I sat up unsure why I could not see. One eye was full of haze, and other I could not open. It wasn't long till I discovered I had no eye at all. The carcass was gone. Whatever that thing was had spared me, yet did not leave me unharmed. A warning to remember my hubris came in the surgery room. Hours after crawling into my ride, finding my way home, 4 long fingers on an open claw cut across the left side of my face. The index took my eye as its smallest left a scar across my neck, the last missing the vein that surely would have killed me. Forever I will be ugly. The scars from the flesh it tore, unable to heal, little more than the 4 canyon scrapes, grinning like a Glasgow smile. I still work. Still walk through those woods. Still even make the drive once every season to that forbidden staircase, dragging a pig or deer, sometimes onto the dead grass that lay before it. Now I treat the place with the reverence it deserves, leaving whatever roams these woods to its eternity. Ever since, there hasn't been a single mauling, just as there wasn't one in the years before. Some might call it a sacrifice, some ritual to appease an ancient god. Me? I don't know what to think. I just don't want to see any more dead kids. Another boring, meaningless day draws to a close as I dump my barely touched takeout in the trash. I don't have much of an appetite these days. Sometimes I feel like I'm stuck where I am. Nothing really sparks an interest in me anymore. Not since Sarah started making her nightly visits. I groan and trudge reluctantly towards the kitchen sink, which is filled with dirty plates and bowls caked and dried, crusted chunks of food. I had been putting them off for a week now, and I know I can't leave them there forever. I wash them. It takes forever since my rag can't scrub anything off. I feel like I've been working on this for years when all of a sudden, numbing spike of dread drives itself into the back of my neck. I freeze and my eyes glance at the wall-mounted clock next to me. It reads 10:20 p.m., and I know exactly what that time means. I tear my eyes away from the clock and focus solely on the dish mountain in front of me. Don't turn around, I command myself. Just stay focused. Ignore it. The front door slowly creaks open, even though I am certain I locked it. I hear the sounds of boots dragging themselves towards me. My breath shortens and my body tenses. I squeeze my eyes shut and pray it leaves me alone. I feel its eyes boring into the back of my head, and I only relax the slightest bit when I hear it take a seat at the kitchen table. "Hey, Jeremy," it greets, almost casually if not for the clipped edge in its tone. "Got a second?" I exhale slowly and resume scrubbing away at a fork. Yeah, I force out. How's it going? A scoff. It's going like hell, honestly, it exclaims, and I can imagine it throwing up its hands in frustration. First, I wake up late because of my neighbor I keep complaining about partying all night again. Seriously, I have half a mind to make a noise complaint already. I caught sight of him when I got in my car, too, all smiles and waving at me like he didn't give me sleep deprivation. Seriously. I nod in agreement, even though I know that neighbor unalived himself 6 months ago after his girlfriend cheated on him. Behind me there's a subtle shift in movement that sends alarm bells ringing in my head. The chair groans with age as the thing sitting in it stretches and sighs. So of course I get to work and my boss is just the worst. It continues with a bitter snarl. He's saying stuff like, "You made a commitment to the team, and we need every cog in order to function." It's getting frustrated. The atmosphere plummets into a freezing temperature. I see my breath condense in front of me, and it's getting hard to breathe. It feels like water fills my lungs. I grip a bowl so tight it cracks down the middle. The thing stops talking, and I feel it gazing at me again. "You okay, Jeremy?" It asks almost instantly. I open my mouth, but no sound comes out. It feels like I'm choking. A sensation of cold, bitter water rushing into my throat prevents me from speaking. I almost collapse, but grip the sides of the sink like a lifeline. Instead of speaking, I nod silently. A moment stretched over an eternity passes by. The thing sighs and I hear it lean back in its seat. Anyway, it trails off, still gazing at me. I wait for it to continue, and it does. So now everybody is acting like the reason we're behind on our project is me. Which is not true. Like hell it is. I'm the only one keeping these idiots afloat. They'd be clueless without me. Especially the boss. I swear he only got the job because of his daddy's money. It's true. But what I don't say is that the boss got caught in a laundering scandal that got him fired and disowned by his father a year ago. So I'm basically strong-armed into staying in late while everybody else gets to go have fun, you know? So now I'm doing everybody else's work like always, except this time there's no getting a thank you afterwards. It growls angrily, and I hear its nails claw into the wooden kitchen table. It lets out a short, shallow breath and grumbles something under its breath. So I finally get out at like 10:15, and I just can't wait to get home at this point. But then just when I'm passing over the bridge, I find someone tailing right behind me. And of course, he has his high beams, which are practically blinding me. So I'm trying to speed up to get away from this guy, but he just keeps following me. And then if you can believe it, it stops talking. Silence hangs over us as it lets out a wet, shaking breath. It bumps into me. It whispers. And I lose control of the car and I... Sadness fills me as it struggles to comprehend what happened. I want to comfort it, but I can't bear to look at it. I've only caught a glimpse of it once before, and I wouldn't wish that sight on my worst enemy. Pale and bloated, covered in a slimy sheen of river water, half its face rotted away, glaring at me with eyeless sockets. A misshapen, bloated hand rests itself on my shoulder. Terror strikes me like a bullet as I realize it had crawled to me. I begin to hyperventilate and shiver intensely as a ragged, waterlogged breath caresses my ear. It's not supposed to be this close. Why is it on me? I wonder if I'm going to die. If it has finally become too lonely and wishes to bring me into its eternal suffering. It's just not fair, is it? It whispers to me. My eyes sting with tears as a vile, ungodly stench that reeked like cold, rotten meat permeated around me. Its broken nails dig into my shoulder, drawing out pinpricks of blood. Why did today have to be like this? What did I do to deserve this? To live like this? I have no answer. I can't think of a single thing I could say to salvage this. I become aware of piss streaming down my quivering legs. This is it. This is how it ends for me. Silence. Until finally a deep, forlorn sigh breaks the tension. The nails retract from my skin and the clammy hand pats my shoulder. I guess you wouldn't know. It decided, and I feel its presence fading from my side. Have a good night, Jeremy. See you tomorrow? No, dear God, no. Of course. I groan weakly. Thank you. It's gone and I collapse to the floor in a heap. I shift into my stomach and upheave everything onto the floor. I'm practically swimming in my own vomit, but I'm too relieved to be alive to care. I begin to sob, not only for my situation, but also for what that thing that visits me used to be. 3 years ago, my friend Sarah lost control of her vehicle, causing it to crash over the town bridge, leading to her drowning in the river. Before she crossed the bridge that would lead to her death, she had sent me a text asking if she could come over and vent to me about how bad her day was. I said yes, and she's been coming over ever since. I am an anxious person. I always have been. Whether I'm finding ways to avoid eye contact with mutual acquaintances at the grocery store, or speaking up when a waiter brings me the wrong order. My natural state of being is complete avoidance of difficulty with other human beings. As you might guess, I am a bit of a shut-in. About a year ago, things really went south, and I realized an indisputable truth. I was out of shape. I didn't like what I saw when I looked in the mirror, or what I felt when I had to walk up a long flight of stairs. So, like millions of Americans before me, I joined a gym. I listened to the attendant go on and on about the various functions of the equipment and the various features the gym contained. Weekly classes, monthly raffles, membership bonuses, saunas. I nodded my head absently, perhaps a little impatiently. I was here for the basics, and there was no way in hell I was going to get naked in front of other random gym patrons. Be it the dead of summer, or the coldest night of winter, I was going to hop out of the car in my gym clothes, ready for action. And sure as hell, I would be clambering back into my car in the same sweat-soaked gym clothes. There was one key featured that interested me, though. The gym was open 24 hours a day. One look around this temple of fitness and physique, and the preening, grunting, and occasionally just plain posturing clientele I would be potentially sharing this space with cemented my battle plan. I was going to be working out at night. I don't mean to sound so sullen and judgmental. I really don't begrudge people their life choices, but the 6 to 7 p.m. crowd really wasn't my scene. Besides, I work a 9-to-5 bank job, and I am definitely not a morning person. The gym wasn't too far from my apartment, so I figured I would go home, do some housework, maybe get some couch time in, and head over around 9. It seemed like a solid battle plan. So on a muggy, hazy Wednesday night, when my alarm began to blare, I dragged myself away from my computer, threw on an old t-shirt and some shorts, and drove over to the gym. Walking in, I felt a certain amount of apprehension. There was loud pop music playing over the speakers, and the clang and clamor of dozens of gym-goers as they lifted, grunted, and socialized. Feeling awkward, I went over towards a machine that seemed easy to use. You just pull the handles in towards the center of your body. Easy enough. As my classic rock workout mix belted out AC/DC, Judas Priest, Metallica, and Duran Duran, and I awkwardly studied the diagrams on the machines and learned the various techniques of pushing and pulling, I began to feel like I was getting into my stride. It's amazing how a little bit of physical exertion can really burn away awkwardness and anxiety. At just shy of 10, I exited the gym feeling sweaty, sore, and content. By 3 months, I realized that despite my slightly pessimistic starting attitude, I had really come to enjoy this place. Driving home and looking in the gym windows, it looked like an introvert's nightmare, but by 9 p.m., the crowd had thinned out drastically. I began to become comfortable pushing my start time to 9:30 or sometimes even 10 if I really wanted the solitude. It was almost even peaceful by then some nights. Almost. I still wasn't that comfortable interacting with anyone, although I had reluctantly begun to ask people to spot me when needed, and occasionally nodded and smiled at a few of the regulars who kept to similar workout routines as me. I also happened to notice during this time that I was beginning to get in much better shape. I've never felt strongly about my appearance, positively or negatively, but I felt like things might actually be starting to tip in the positive direction. About 5 months into my fitness journey, I was still making progress. I had banked some personal time off at work, and despite not having anything in particular to do with it, I decided to take a few weeks to myself. I figured I could try out the camera that my friend Andy gave me for Christmas, catch up on a stack of Blu-ray rentals, and despite giving myself permission to completely take it easy, I found that I was excited to see what I could do at the gym without the pressure of a work day or the following morning's alarm holding me back. I continued my workouts, and found that I was naturally going later and later. One day, halfway through my time off, I didn't even get to the gym until midnight, and left a little after 1 a.m. I even took my headphones out, and took a second to talk with Sarah, a fellow regular, as she passed me by while I was on the arm curl machine. When I left that night, there were only 2 other people remaining. I felt like a real serious gym goer. On the Friday before I returned to work, Andy wanted to take me out to celebrate. A few months ago, I might have said no. But all of this exercise really had done something to my mental state in addition to my physical. I was feeling bolder, more adventurous, more energetic. I agreed to join him and some mutual friends for drinks. I'm normally not much of a drinker, but I let myself cut loose for once. With just a bit of liquid courage in me, I felt something I hadn't felt in my entire adult life. I felt like I was the life of the party. I weaved through conversation with ease. I made the table laugh uproariously, and I even hit on a guy on the bar and managed to get his number. When we left a few hours, I hugged my friends goodbye. When Andy came in for a hug, he said, "Dude, I don't know what kind of crazy serum you've been drinking, but I need some of it." Seriously though, I'm glad to see you get out and feel comfortable in your own skin for once. He was right. I hadn't even been thinking about it, but I really did feel like a new me, while not feeling like I had compromised myself at all. After some more friendly goodbyes and reassurances that we would do this again soon, I walked back home. The following Saturday, I woke up with a mild hangover. I cooked some bacon and eggs for breakfast and then milled around the house for a bit, doing some final chores that I figured I wouldn't want to do once I returned to work. I tweaked the settings on my camera and settled in for an afternoon of movies. Halfway through the 3rd movie, I got a text from Ben, the guy from the bar. He wanted to meet up for drinks next Friday. I was ecstatic, pausing my movie to get up and anxiously pace. Passing by myself in the mirror, I noticed how the shirt I was wearing was clinging to my muscles. I couldn't believe how things were starting to turn around for me. I had more energy, more confidence, and a reignited social life. I owed it all to the gym. Saturday was a rest day for me, but I was so giddy I thought, to hell with it. I'm going in tonight. By 11 that night when I got to the gym, the air was cool and crisp. I had traded my shorts for joggers, but decided to leave my hoodie in the car, because I was parked right in front of the gym entrance. I walked through the doors and was hit with the familiar pop music, pleasantly turned down in the evening. There were a handful of people still there, including Sarah, who waved at me from the weight rack. I walked over, and we made some small talk before putting in our headphones and going to our respective machines. I was in my element. I was having great sets on every machine, and even set a personal best on the bench. Before long, I realized it was almost midnight. Exhausted, I went to the back of the gym where the treadmills were. Half an hour of solid cardio, and I would go home. Maybe have a shot or two, or even send Ben a flirty text. As I started up the machine, Sarah waved goodbye at me on her way out. I smiled and gave a dorky little salute back at her, and then settled into my run. 10 minutes later, I watched as an older, balding man grabbed his bag from the gym's storage cubbies and walked out the front door. As he was walking out, I had a realization. I was alone. It was almost immediately a surreal feeling. Here was a public space normally crowded with people, but at this moment, I had the place all to myself. I realized then that I really had grown to not mind my fellow gym night owls, and even enjoyed their company. Without any movement, the gym looked almost too still. Here I was, pounding away on the treadmill, and where I was used to seeing weights pulling and lifting and rising, I just saw a field of strange little machines, and neat little columns of weights. Feeling disconcerted, I glanced down at the display on the treadmill. Only 2 minutes left. I decided to cut my workout slightly short, as I was starting to get the creeps a little bit. I took my headphones out, and Billy Joel was replaced with the belting pop from the gym speakers. I hopped off the treadmill and grabbed my water bottle. The music stopped. It just cut out abruptly in the middle of the song. Suddenly I could hear the dull hum of the fluorescent lights. Then the lights started to go out. First the lights by the entrance went out, and then in small batches, the fluorescence started to shut off. The lights blinked off in 3 separate patches until the gym was completely dark. Heart pounding in my chest, I realized that the lights must be set on some kind of motion sensor to save money. I tried jumping up and waving my arms for a second, but nothing happened. Swearing, I looked in the direction of the entrance and realized I could still see the light of the vending machines. My heart skipped a beat as I realized I could see a figure standing in front of them. Standing completely still, arms and legs in a wide stance, absolutely motionless. I stood frozen for what felt like ages. I could feel my adrenaline kicking into high gear. My brain didn't have time to process what was happening, but all of my instincts were screaming at me that I was in danger. Then the figure moved. It flopped onto the ground on all fours and began skittering towards me. Its hands and feet were slapping hard on the tile floor as it moved towards me with alarming pace. My flight or fight response kicked in, and I chose the latter. I started running to the far corner of the gym, away from both the treadmills and the entrance. As I ran, I could hear wet, choked breathing coming from behind me. As the slapping got louder and more frantic, I turned around the corner and ran into the bathrooms, saw an open stall, dove inside and shut the door. I heard the slapping sounds round the corner a second later, and then come to a halt. I heard labored, sickly breathing noises, and then a more measured, deliberate slap, slap, slap noise as whatever this thing was strode across the bathroom floor. As it passed by the stall I was in, I could see the faint shape of what I realized with horror were huge flat hands and feet, with long spindly fingers and toes. The creature got closer and then stopped. I could hear the choked, slobbery breathing noises and also a strange animalistic whimpering. Was it excited? Then the breathing and noises both stopped. It was completely silent in the room. I could hear my blood pounding in my ears. I wanted so badly to sob, to scream, to run, but I didn't dare. I kept my senses on high alert, waiting for what I don't know. But I was locked in a nightmarish stalemate inside the restroom. Then I heard a faint whimper above me. My eyes darted up. I screamed. Two huge luminescent eyes gaped out of the darkness at me. Long, grotesque fingers gripped the top of the stall. The eyes widened, and then the creature began to lift its gangly body up over the stall. It whined and panted in between slobbering, labored breaths. I shrunk into the corner of the stall, screaming and scrambling to get away. I rolled underneath the gap in the stall, and then music started playing loudly. It was like someone turned the gym's pop music mix up the loudest that the system could go. I couldn't hear myself screaming as I got up and ran out of the bathroom. Then the lights turned back on. Blinded by the sudden reveal, I slammed into a weight rack and went spilling over the top. The weights were knocked off with a series of bangs and clangs that one landed on my stomach, knocking the wind out of me. Scrambling to my feet, I continued to sprint towards the exit. I shot a look behind me, and I swear I saw a brown mottled hand disappear behind the corner of the bathroom entrance. I turned back around and immediately collided with someone. "Ow, what the hell?" yelled the girl I ran into. Hopping to my feet again, I looked at her with stunned confusion. "Hey, watch where you're going," said the man next to her, giving me a hard push as he said it. "Go, go," I yelled, gesturing wildly towards the exit. "Get out." I must have looked completely crazy because the man dropped his alpha persona and helped the girl to her feet, warily standing between me and her. "Bro, what is your problem?" he shouted at me. He looked past me where an entire rack of weights had spilled haphazardly onto the floor. "What the? Did you do that?" The world around me began to zoom back into the mundane, the nightmarish ordeal of a few minutes before fading for a scene of discomfort and confrontation with regular people at the gym. I muttered, "Yeah, no, bye," and hurried around them to my car. When I walked outside, I could see that the sky had begun ever so slightly to lighten. I looked at my phone. It was 4 a.m. What happened? How did I lose over 3 hours? I turned around at the gym entrance and I could see that the couple were still looking at me and pointing, and the girl had her phone out. Between my still fading terror and my extreme discomfort at this altercation, I hopped in my car and raced home as fast as I could. When I got home, I went to my cabinet, got a bottle of vodka, and drank until I passed out. I assumed that the couple called the police, or the owners, or someone about me, but nothing ever came of it. I never went back to that gym, and no authorities ever contacted me. I try to tell myself that it was some kind of nightmare, or hallucination, or something, but I know deep down that it actually happened. I don't know what it was, and that frightens me to my core. I'll never know if it was an experience confined to that particular gym, or that particular night, or if whatever was in there is out there somewhere. Will I see that figure again in a dark room, or hear those whining rasps of breath? Will I see long fingers gripping the corner of my bedroom door at night? Either way, I don't want to go to the gym at night anymore. As the title suggests, something strange has been going on with my grandmother. It started about a month ago. That's when I started writing down anything she said or did that was out of the ordinary. It has progressed into something truly bizarre and frightening. These are the logs that I've kept since it started. My grandma just had a moment of clarity. She had a moment of true lucidity. I guess I should back up a little. I've basically lived with my grandmother all my life. My mother passed shortly after giving birth to me, and oddly, so did my grandfather. Dad was never around. It's not important why. The point is, I never really had parents. I had my grandma. Our family is very small. My grandmother's only other children were my aunt and uncle, who have both passed. My uncle was gone before I was born. My aunt passed away when I was about 13. It wasn't long after that that Grandma started showing signs of Alzheimer's. Prior to that, she would occasionally forget someone's name, nothing major though. After my aunt passed, it was just me and Grandma. She was a very sweet lady who always wanted to take care of people. I just feel like life isn't fair. She didn't deserve to have this happen to her. She outlived all her children and then got Alzheimer's. If it was going to happen, it could have at least happened before the majority of the family was gone. She had been through a lot. I can't imagine how that feels. Aside from my aunt, I barely remember any of the family. For Grandma to lose so many people in such a short time is just awful. Grandma did have a wild side though. Hell, she once held a gas station up at Needle Point. Sorry, that was cheesy. Figured I'd lighten the mood a bit. This is getting a bit depressing, but the reason I'm writing this is because something amazing just happened. First, I have to explain Grandma's condition. She started slowly losing it in my early teen years. She was still able to take care of herself, but would become confused pretty easily. At first, it was just a once-in-a-while thing. A slip-up here or there. It progressed pretty quickly, though. By the time I was about 16 or 17, she needed an aide. I took care of her most of the time, but had to go to school. Grandma lived on what was left of the family money, and was able to afford an aide to come while I was at school. The family money is a bit of a mystery to me. From what Grandma told me when I was younger, my grandpa used to be pretty wealthy. That is, a zillionaire, but technically a millionaire. Especially for our little town, he was a wealthy guy. He owned a few small businesses back in the day, but ended up selling them. I'm not sure why there isn't much money left, honestly. Maybe they spoiled their kids when they were around. Maybe they made some bad investments. My grandmother worked full-time until she was 60. I would think she'd have retirement that she's been living off, so I don't understand why there isn't more money. I'm not worried about an inheritance or anything like that. It's just the fact that we can't afford an aide anymore. Her mental health deteriorated steadily over the years. After high school, I got a job right away to try to help out. Grandma had told me multiple times that she never wanted to be put in a nursing home under any circumstances. I figured I could work and help her at the same time so she could stay in her home. This worked for a while but got tougher over time. We had an aide who would come for a little while each day to help her eat and go to the bathroom. By this point, she recognized me but didn't completely remember me. She was doing strange things like hanging pizza on the clothesline or putting a sponge in the microwave. I'd be lying if I said the pizza on the clothesline didn't make me chuckle a bit, but I knew that it was getting dangerous. She wasn't able to be home alone for any amount of time anymore. We were unable to pay for a full-time aide, so I ended up leaving my job. Between my savings and the last of the family money, we had enough to eat and pay the bills. It was just barely enough, but we got by. That's pretty much where we are now. I do some freelance work. I've been selling some stuff online. Stuff like that. I'm in my mid-20s and I'll figure out my life when Grandma is gone. She needs me. I'm all she has now. Grandma's mental state has been rough. She doesn't talk much anymore, mostly mumbles. She struggles to find the words but can usually communicate what she needs. It's usually some mumbles and I can vaguely hear water or hungry, bathroom, etc. That's what brings me to why I'm writing this. She hasn't been able to have a real conversation in a few years. Today, though, something happened. I ran to the store down the street real quick. I was only gone for a few minutes. When I got back, I walked into the living room and saw Grandma sitting in her chair staring out the window. She had a big smile on her face. That was odd. She didn't convey much emotion these days, and almost never positive emotions. I asked her, "What you doing, Grandma?" I was stunned when she replied, "I'm waiting for the guys," she said. I couldn't believe it. Regardless if what she said made sense, she hadn't spoken a full coherent sentence in over a year. I asked her to elaborate. "The guys?" I asked. "Tommy and Eric are coming over, and we're gonna go skateboarding," she replied. This was even more strange. Tommy and Eric are the names of my childhood best friends. We'd go skateboarding around town all the time. That was before Grandma started having issues. I tried to keep her talking, but it was like a switch flipped and she went back to mumbling. She had a moment of clarity, though. A moment where she could speak clearly like she used to. She seemed to recover a memory. It was my memory, though. She knew my friends' names back then, though. She could have remembered me saying that. It's odd, but I'm taking it as a win. She showed that she could improve. If she had one moment of lucidity, she could have more. It's been a week since she spoke. I was losing hope and starting to think it was a fluke. It wasn't, though. Today it happened again. I was watching TV in the living room while Grandma was in bed taking a nap. I heard a noise and immediately jumped up to see if she was okay. I got to the hallway to see her walking toward me with a big smile on her face. She can still walk, but she doesn't much, and she never moves this fast. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Yeah," she replied excitedly. "Has the mail come yet?" "I don't think it has yet today. Why do you ask?" "My new board should be here today." "Your board?" I asked. "Skateboard. It's a zero deck with tensor trucks. I got Spitfire wheels and Bones bearings. I've been saving it up for months. You can pick all your parts on the site and they assemble it for you. I got it without the grip tape on though, so I can cut a design into it and put it on myself." Wow, that wasn't just a sentence. It was a detailed explanation. I don't get it though. Even if she remembered me waiting for my board to be delivered, how did she know all those details? She wouldn't have known those brands or skateboard parts even before Alzheimer's. She had no idea what I was talking about at the time. She was right though. Every detail. She described my skateboard perfectly. I must have been 13 at the time. I did order that board. I did get a grip tape separate so I could cut a design into it. I remember that it came out looking really terrible. I just don't get how she'd know the details. I asked her to further elaborate, but after describing the skateboard, she seemed to return to mumbling and muttering again. It was so strange to watch her pop in and out of lucidity so rapidly. It was more strange that in her lucid moments, she seemed to think that she was me. I couldn't explain it, and I couldn't find any information on anything similar. I called her doctor. He said that it was possible for her to have moments of lucidity. He didn't seem to grasp how detailed her explanation was, though. She remembered something she wouldn't have even known at the time. At any point in time. 2 days later, it happened again. I saw her sitting on the couch with that smile. I asked if everything was okay. Her smile turned into a look of shame. Then she told me about something that she had hidden under her bed. Now, I'm not gonna say what that something was. I did have something hidden under my bed when I was a kid, though. Something embarrassing. Don't worry, it's nothing crazy. I'm not a psycho. It wasn't a severed head. I'm not a weirdo. It wasn't a picture of a severed head. I'm not a pervert. It's not a picture of someone receiving a severed head. It's just something embarrassing that I never told anyone. It doesn't have anything to do with a severed head. Just using that as an example. I mean it that I never told anyone. I never told a friend or a girlfriend. I'm positive I never told Grandma. If she would have found it at the time, she would have said something to me at the time. Apologies again for not saying what it is. Just know that it's nothing crazy or scary or gross. The point is that she knew. For the third time, she seemed to recover in memory of mine. This time, I have no possible explanation for how she could have known. She simply couldn't have. Somehow, she is recovering my memories. I'm over the moon to see that she's having moments of lucidity and that she's recovering memories. I just can't get past how bizarre it is that those memories are mine. I called her doctor again. She has an upcoming appointment in a couple weeks, so he suggested we talk about it then. I'm frustrated by how uninterested he's been. Something very strange is happening with his patient. He could be a part of some medical breakthrough. If they can study what is going on with her, maybe they can figure out how to help other people afflicted with these ailments. Maybe they can help her recover her own memories. It's been another 3 days since she mentioned what was under the bed when I was a kid. I decided to try and spark some of her own memories. I brought up some old curtains from the basement and hung them up. I regularly asked her about her marriage and her childhood, but nothing seemed to work. I asked about her childhood home. I asked about her school years. Nothing. She just responded with the usual muttering. It had been almost a week since her last moment of lucidity before it happened again. She told me that she was going to take some time off of work to spend more time with me. She said it exactly how I said it to her when I left my job to take care of her. Then again, she went back to muttering. I tried to get a recording of her in these lucid moments, but it was like she knew when I was recording. They were also too random to know when they would come. After she told me she was taking work off for a while, I only had to wait a day for the next lucid moment. She was sitting on the couch by the window when I walked into the room. When she noticed me, she quickly asked if I was okay. "I'm fine. How are you feeling?" I asked. "I'm feeling fine," she responded. "I just gotta know. How did you know about my skateboard and the thing under my bed when I was a kid? What can you remember now? Can you remember when you got married? Do you remember having kids?" I started muttering. I had no idea how to respond to that. She was asking me the exact same questions I had just asked her the last time she seemed lucid. It's like she was recovering my memories all the way up to the present. Did she think I was her? Did she think she was me? I've been anxiously awaiting the upcoming doctor's appointment. I need to know what's going on. I'm starting to feel like I'm losing my mind. I've dedicated so much time to taking care of her that I don't really have other people in my life. There's no one to talk to about this, and the doctor has been frustratingly nonchalant about my concerns. We are now 2 days away from the doctor's appointment, and Grandma seems to be having a lucid moment. As I've been observing her, I've noticed a specific look she gets on her face before the lucid moments come. I'm attempting to dictate what she's saying to me in real time. I'm using voice dictation on my phone to help, so forgive me for random typos that might occur. This time seems different from the others. She doesn't seem happy. She doesn't seem excited or nostalgic. She seems shook, for lack of a better term. I'm back. Oh my God, I'm back, she said with a look of relief on her face. What's happening? How are you feeling? I asked. It's... She paused and looked around for a moment. Oh no, she said somberly. What's going on? What happened? Where are you back from? I asked. I didn't want to put too much pressure on her and her delicate state, but I had to get as much information as possible when she had these moments. She was very confused at first, but articulate more so than usual. When I asked where she had come back from, she had a horrified look on her face. The dark place. They're going to come and get me, and take me there all over again, she yelled as her calm demeanor turned into a panic. The dark place? I asked. She just paused and maybe losing her lucidity. She went from calm to afraid, and now has a look of pure misery on her face. It's pain beyond comprehension, she said as she tried to catch her breath. It's physical pain beyond anything anyone could ever imagine. It's almost like you feel more. Pain hurts more. Mental agony hurts more. They torture you in ways human beings can't even comprehend. The dark place is indescribable misery. It can't be explained in ways human beings can understand. Living humans aren't capable of understanding it. I began to ask her a follow-up question, but she continued. You don't have the senses necessary to comprehend all of it. There is physical pain, immense physical pain, as well as mental torment beyond anything you could ever pretend to imagine. There's more to it, though, than just that. Those are just the aspects that can be described in a way that we can understand. What do you mean by that? I asked nervously. There are aspects of life in the universe around us that we are unable to recognize or see. There's things all around us that we can't visualize because we don't have the senses necessary. When you're in the dark place, you develop those new senses, and you experience those new sensations, and they're more horrible than anything you could ever fathom. I'm completely confused and frightened by what she is telling me. What is this dark place she's talking about? What are these sensations she's referring to? Are you talking about, like, hell? I asked, well, somewhat wondering if I had completely lost my mind myself. I don't know. I guess it's something like that. Different civilizations have had different interpretations of these dark places. I don't think any of them got it right. They talk about fire and brimstone. I wish there was fire, anything to light up the darkness. It always feels like I'm on fire. That doesn't even compare to the other sensations, though. I don't even think we have words to describe them. I don't know if it's extraterrestrial, if it's hell, or a dimensional rip into a place more horrible than anything I could have ever imagined. It's okay, I said. You're home now. They'll come back for me eventually, just like they did back then. Back when? I asked urgently. When did they take you? Years ago. I think it's years. There's no way to tell. They mess with your head to the point that you can't keep track of time and can't figure out what's happening aside from the misery and pain. I'm so sorry, I said, confused and frightened. Do you know why that was happening? I asked. My grandfather. We used to all think the family was cursed. Poor grandma outlived all of her children. She would also eventually outlive her grandchildren. My grandfather had a deal with someone. I don't know who it is. All I know is that he sacrificed the rest of us. He bargained for grandma to be able to live to be 100 years old. They just didn't tell him that she would start losing her mind in the 70s. She would outlive her own mind. All of his descendants would be damned to the dark place. He didn't know how awful it really was. He's a human being, and human beings aren't physically able to comprehend the things they experienced in the dark place. So you're telling me that's how Grandpa got his money? He just sacrificed the entire family? I asked the question in an almost sarcastic tone. I figured that grandmother's newfound lucidity had crossed over with her mental impairments. Yes, he did, she replied. Grandma told me this right before they came. Before they came? Before who came? I asked. I never got a good look at them. It's so dark. For so long. I can hear the awful sounds they make, can feel the pain they inflict. I endure the further sensations. Those are the worst. The ones I can't comprehend, but I can experience it. It's immense misery that's literally beyond comprehension. No one on earth has felt this level of agony. You never get used to it either. They somehow take away your ability to build up a threshold for pain, depression, and overall misery. They know how to keep it constant. Grandma started coughing after telling me this. I went to the kitchen and got her a glass of water. She still seemed to be in a state of fear and panic when I returned. When did they take you? I asked as she sipped the water. I knew something weird was going on, she said. My grandma, who had been afflicted with dementia and Alzheimer's, randomly started having moments of lucidity. I tried to keep track of them. I started realizing that they weren't her memories. They were mine. I don't understand what's happening. She seemed to be recalling my past memories. Then she seemed to be recalling my present memories. Now it's like she's describing what I've been through with her. I figured I might as well ask her what would happen next. When did they come? What happened with your grandma? I asked. She told me about the dark place. She described it as best as a living human being could. I got her some water and inquired further. Then there was a knock on the door. I'm trying to process all this in real time as I write this. Grandma hasn't been lucid for this long in years. There are tears streaming down her face as she tries to describe the dark place. Is it something caused by her ailments? Hallucinations, maybe. Is her lucidity more local than mental? Could this be all from her imagination? Her crying started to get worse as I finished typing that. It was just a few tears and some sniffling, but it has turned into a full-blown sobbing now. She keeps talking about how horrible and indescribable the dark place is. It's hard to tell if she's really in a state of lucidity or not. But as I finished writing this down, she addressed me by name. Sean? She shouted. Yes, it's me, Grandma. I replied. I was excited because she hadn't remembered my name in years. This was the conversation, she said. What conversation? I asked. The last one we ever had. What do you mean? I asked. This is the exact conversation I had with my grandmother before they arrived, she said. They banged on the door. Grandma told me to run. I ran into the basement as they broke through the front door. I rushed down there and locked it from the inside. I could hear someone stomping upstairs, and it sounded like they were walking right past Grandma. They weren't here for her. They were here for me. I just tried to speak, but she continued. I took my phone out and wrote down the last observations and conversations with Grandma. I figured that someone needed to know. I posted it online as they broke through the basement door. It wasn't long before they found me. Grandma? She interrupted again. As it approached me, my vision blurred. My ears started ringing so loudly that I thought they would explode. I felt it surround me. It, them, I don't really know who. I'm struggling to grasp what she's saying. The dark place she described sounds like hell, but she claims it's worse. Why is she remembering my memories? And why does she think she went to this dark place? Is this what she feels when she isn't lucid? Grandma just started muttering again. The muttering usually means she isn't lucid. She keeps looking over at the door and she still looks scared. I was about to get up and go for a walk to clear my head. But there was a knock on the door moments ago. Seconds after she heard the knocking, Grandma looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Run." I'm in the basement now. Something just broke through the front door. They're about to break through the basement door. I'm posting now. I'm out of time and someone needs to know what's happening. I'm still not completely sure. Oh no. They're in. I love you, Grandma. Could you send in the closet man? I asked my secretary. She sighed and heard her yell for him. I could hear the distinct thumps on the ground before hearing the familiar tone. "He's on his way," from my secretary. There was a knock on the door. I adjusted my desk and walked up to the door to open it up. There, standing in casual clothing, was an 8-foot-tall man. His face had a large split down the middle, exposing rows of sharp teeth. His eyes were glossy white, and legs were nothing but long stumps which struggled to keep his body balanced. He bared his teeth somewhat, smiling as I gestured to the couch where he slowly sat down. "How are we doing today, Vic?" I asked. He covered his face with his fingers. "Relatively bad, so to say," he hissed. He reached his hand down to pet my cat, who was cuddling against his leg. I smiled as I sat down and asked my first question. "So what brings you here?" "Every night I go to a different house, hiding in the closets of unsuspecting kids, cowering beneath their blankets in an attempt to introduce them to the meaning of fear. But as of lately, I've been finding my job has already been completed. So I tried teenagers. They were even worse. They had boxes and socks filled with their..." He cut himself off. I tried to motion for him to continue, but he looked up at me with genuine concern in his glossy eyes. "Trust me, you don't want to know what I've seen when it comes to them. It's barbaric. It's sickening even for me. I mean, I don't have a stomach, but it makes me want to throw up." He gagged at the thought. I took down notes. "So it must be pretty bad out there lately, huh?" I asked after a moment of silence. He looked up at me. "I told you about the oath all of us monsters took when we hide under the beds or closets of kids, right?" he asked. "Yeah, that you would never hurt any child no matter how much you wanted to," I answered. He nodded. "Lately during my nightly calls, there was something else with me. I can't even begin to describe it. It was this feeling of pure evil, darkness, that void feeling you have when you feel you're in danger. I hid in this child's closet, and I could only describe it as just this dark cloud which passed over the house. It was the closest I've ever been to being afraid for myself." He shuddered. "Was there a possibility it was the boogeyman? I mean, next time he comes in, I'll ask if he knows about this and see if we can..." "It's not him. It's not the boogeyman. It's not any monster or demon I've ever met. It wanted me dead. I knew it did. I have lots of angels out to get me, but this wasn't an angel either." He had a look of pure terror on his face. He began to tear up as I looked outside of my window to see a strange man lurking in the shadows. "What the hell?" I asked out loud, so I called my secretary. "Hey Kelly, is there anybody scheduled after the closet man?" I asked, knowing the answer. "No, but there was someone in here earlier asking about someone by the name of Victor." I dropped the phone. Victor was the closet man's real name. The name before he was given the job of being a monster under the bed. Vic, we need to get you somewhere safe. I don't think you're safe here, I said. He stood up on his stumps and awkwardly walked to the door. Where do we go? He asked. I shrugged, and we both walked out of the office. He dissipated into smoke and moved along the shadows as I walked out of the office with him tailing close behind me. The man was standing next to a pole about 100 feet from my car. I began to panic as I rushed into the car. Victor took form in the car again, taking up the entire back seat. I looked in the mirror and sighed with relief. When I turned to the passenger's side, I screamed in terror, as did Victor. The man was standing next to the car, asking to roll down the window. I was frozen in fear, and I tend to monsters. This made no sense. Everything I had seen, werewolves, skeletons, ghosts, the literal boogeyman, and yet I trembled in fear at this man. He had a steel gray mustache. His hair was unkempt, looking like it was covered in cornstarch, and he was dressed like a businessman. He gave a warm smile as he reached out for me to shake his hand. My name is Tomeo. I just wanted to touch base with you. He smiled. Victor gave a nod before I opened the door for this strange man. Do you know who I am? He asked. I shook my head no. Typical. Nobody knows me anymore. They rely on your monsters, ghost stories by the campfire, to tell the stories of beings beyond your comprehension. He sighed. I gripped the steering wheel with all of my strength in my body, trying to comfort myself. You see, Tess, you can see them even though you aren't a child. Every child forgets, but you never did. That is why you see them. That is why you see me, but my time is coming. I stopped gripping the steering wheel. Victor spoke up. What do you want from us? He asked. Tomeo looked back and smiled. It's not about what I want from you. It's what I'm going to do to all of you, he said happily. I felt a pit in my stomach. This man was giving off the energy of pure evil in physical form. Lucifer, I said quietly. He laughed hysterically, almost like a madman. Trust me, he wishes he was me. He wishes he had the guts to do what I'm capable of. Witches? He cleared his throat. Killing the monsters, of course. Introducing a new way of making them fear. Sending a message that monsters are monsters. They kill, they torture, and they enjoy it. I tried to grab Tomeo, but immediately he turned around and stabbed Victor in the face with an ornamental dagger. No, I screamed. He smiled as he opened the door. My time has come. It's not for humanity to be put back on the food chain for all of us, he said before walking away and dissipating into a black cloud of smoke. I removed the blade and threw it out of the window. I tried to wrap the wound, but the blood seeping out was too much. He gasped in pain as he tried to help cover the wound. Please, Tessa, don't let him win. Think of the kids. He'll kill thousands, maybe millions. He sputtered out before going limp in the back of my car. I cried softly as the sun began to set. The next morning I walked into my office to find a thick envelope sitting on my desk. I opened them up and began to cry again. In the envelope were photos of slaughtered monsters. Dracula impaled on a wooden fence post. A werewolf spliced open with a dagger sitting in his head. The boogeyman hanging from his own guts. Demons ripped in half. Inside was a note written in monster blood. The night is my domain now. There are no saviors. No monsters to hide under your bed. Just fear. I am the darkness. I am the meaning of fear. And now the entire human race will experience how it feels to be back on the food chain. Good night, Tessa. The note was signed by Tomeo. I knew already I couldn't stop it. And now it's out there. Fear. When my face started peeling, I thought it was the new face wash I had recently bought. My friend recommended it, and it was rated 10.0 on the best of lists on several websites. I was disappointed because the few times I used it, I really liked it, but I couldn't chance it, so I threw the cleanser in the trash. 2 days later, my face was still peeling, and it was much worse. It was so dry, the texture akin to snakeskin. I racked my mind for a possible cause, but couldn't think of any. Not only did it look disgusting, but it itched like absolute hell. I found myself scratching absent-mindedly. I scratched so hard that I drew blood. I only noticed when I glimpsed my red fingertips. My nail beds were clogged with chunks of skin. I finally realized that something was very wrong when I went to get my hair done. I went to a stylist to get my standard summer box braids. When she was done, she dipped my braids into a boiling pot of water and carefully wrapped my hair in a towel so I wouldn't get burned. When she took the towel away, she gasped, and my heart thumped painfully. "What's wrong?" I asked, but she didn't answer. I snatched her mirror off the table and peered at my reflection. I screamed. Every braid had come out of my head. Some clung to my scalp, hanging by bloody, vicious threads. I watched as a trail of dark blood slowly dripped from my skull and trickled down my nose. I slammed down the mirror and ran outside to my car. I blocked the stylist as she repeatedly called me to ask for payment. By the time I got home, all of my hair was gone, every single strand and most, if not all, of my scalp. My skin fell off in long, bloody strips. My face formed boils that burst and spurted foul, yellow pus. My eyes, which have always been my best feature, were now met with thick mucus and yellow, like the eyes of a reptile. I looked into those eyes, my once beautiful eyes, and oh my God, I remember. It was a memory I had tossed aside because I didn't deem it important to remember. My cousin's birthday was a week ago. She had always been into that mystic, spooky stuff. The woman she hired referred to herself as a spiritualist. She told us we were going to host a seance. She ignored my laugh and the roll of my eyes. We lit red candles and turned off the lights, and then we sat in a circle and held hands. The spiritualist started chanting, and it made me uneasy. When I opened my eyes, she was staring at me. I had drank quite a bit, and it annoyed me I had to sit through this stuff. So childishly, I stuck my tongue out at her. She kept looking at me, but I refused to back down. And then she smiled and everything went black. I was trapped in a sea of fire and everything was burning. I tried to scream, but my mouth was sewn shut. My skin bubbled, blackened, and peeled. I saw her then. She had her back turned to me. She was tall and thin and had the most beautiful black hair I had ever seen. And then she looked at me. I screamed. My fear wrenched my lips apart. The woman had no face, and her skin was mottled blue, black, and gray. She lurches towards me and tapped my forehead with a gnarled finger. She caressed the contours of my cheeks, encircled the hollows of my eyes, and traced patterns on my lips. She gripped the underside of my jaw, and with surprising strength, she sank her fingers into my flesh and tore my face off. The world burned, and I screamed again. I never thought it possible to scream without lips. She molded my face onto her skull, and then she smiled at me. My body sank into fire, and I burned. When I awoke, I was on the floor, dripping wet and reeking of alcohol. My cousin and her friends surrounded me. They looked confused and concerned. "What happened?" I asked, snatching the towel offered to me. My cousin told me I had fallen and then started screaming. They didn't know what to do, so she, my cousin, threw a glass of wine on me. "Where is she?" I spat. I took out my compact mirror and vigorously checked my flawless reflection. Where is who? My cousin asked. The spiritualist. She did this. She did something to me. My cousin looked at me as though I were crazy. There was no spiritualist here, Bree. She gestured to her friends. Just us. She peered at me. Are you sure you're okay? I think you might have drank too much. I pushed past her to grab another glass of wine. No, the problem is I haven't drunk enough. So I drank more and I forgot. I forced myself to forget. I don't believe in the supernatural. At least I never used to, but now I am losing everything, so I believe. I believe some ugly demon has taken my face and given me hers. Every time I look at my reflection, I cry. What else do I have if I'm no longer beautiful? I am not known for kindness. My personality does not win me friends. I have always been indescribable beauty. The kind of beauty that countries go to war over. And now I am a monster because some jealous beast thing stole my face. I don't know what to do anymore. I am tired of crying. It hurts. My tears burn and make holes in my skin. I've been holed up in my bathroom for days now. I broke my mirror with my fist and shattered it with my brittle bones. There are shards everywhere. Reflections of me. I can't escape it. I can't run from myself. I give up. To you, the demonic whatever you are, congrats, you win. I no longer want to see what I look like. I am tired of seeing my soul reflected back at me. I want to see her again. You know, for a final showdown. I want my face back. It's mine. It's always been mine. She doesn't come though, and why would she? I am so tired. I'll close my eyes and rest for a moment. I just want to sleep because if I sleep, then perhaps I will dream, and I will get lost in the memory of my beauty. A suburban lifestyle can get a little boring. Similar looking houses, the tranquility of the streets seem to not be affected by anything other than an occasional car horn. Kids playing soccer in the front yard, but no binge drinking at 2 in the morning, going to a gala at an art gallery, or clubbing at a discounted music venue. As a man in his early 30s, I reckoned it was time to settle down when I inherited a small house in the suburban area from my grandparents. I wasn't complaining. I was sick of living paycheck to paycheck, unable to juggle between paying for rent or saving up. But this new life was also a little boring to say the least. I was craving something interesting in my life. Some spark. That was it. That's when I noticed a young couple that recently moved in. Their house was right across from mine. They didn't seem anything out of ordinary. They kept to themselves and did not seem to bother anyone else. To be fair, I barely interacted with any of them, which meant that I had no idea what they were really like. But they were young, and it was rather rare to see homeowners so young in my neighborhood. I had millions of questions. What was their reason for staying here? What did they do for work? Did they have kids? I decided I would try befriending them if I could. Get to know more about my neighbors. That seemed to align with my idea of having a little spark in my life. Slow but steady. That was it. It was a Friday evening. I walked over to their front porch. It was a standard house with standard decoration. There was a minimalistic mat in front of the door that read, "Have a good day." Nothing out of the ordinary, as I said. I heard shuffling within the house. They must be organizing their new furniture or sweeping the floor, I thought nonchalantly. "Hello? Is anyone there?" I knocked on the door. A pause. There was silence, but it was a silence that felt a little strange to me. I did not hear a voice or anything. Not a, "Hey, can you go check the door?" Just an abrupt silence. It was as if whoever was inside paused what they were doing immediately and were waiting. Waiting for what? I'm your neighbor Steve. I wanted to introduce myself. I paused for a minute. I knew someone was in there. Something did not feel too right, but I internally laughed at myself. A lot of people make it seem like they are not at home when strangers come in front of their house. It was perfectly normal. I decided to count to 10 and then leave when I heard the doorknob turn. Hi Steve, nice to meet you. A perfectly ordinary looking man in his early 30s greeted me with a smile. He had a buzz cut that was a little too short, and was wearing a pair of round glasses that were crooked on one end. He looked very calm, as if there was nothing that happened beforehand, and he merely stood up after sitting on a sofa. My name is also Steve. How's it going? Wow, same name. Doing good. Just wanted to swing by and introduce myself. It's fairly rare to see someone so young move into this neighborhood. Yes, that's true. That is true. The neighbor smiled, but I was not sure if I wanted to continue on with this topic or not. Hey, I was wondering, are you free tomorrow evening? I want to invite you two over for dinner at my place. I thought it would be fun, with some alcohol too. I winked. I don't know why I winked, but I guess I wanted to keep the mood a little lighthearted. It felt a little tense. The other Steve was staring at me intently. He was so calm just a minute ago. What was he on about? Of course, Steve. The neighbor spoke. There was a pause of about 10 seconds. I did not know whether to stare at him back or look at the ground. But we don't want you to prepare all the food. How about a potluck? We will bring some food and we can all share. Do you have any dietary restrictions? Any meat that you should avoid eating? I like all kinds of food, Steve. I'd appreciate it. That's perfect. The neighbor smiled, showing his perfectly white, pearly teeth. We will see you tomorrow. It was nice meeting you, Steve. Same goes for you. I walked back to my house, unsure whether it was a good interaction or not. The other Steve was definitely polite, but there was something a little uncanny about him that I could not put a finger on. Maybe it was his stare. The intensity of it made it unreal. I shook my head. I was bothered by the smallest things. Meditation, journaling. I needed to stop watching horror movies in my free time. Binging Get Out the day before was definitely not a good idea. That night, I was tumbling around the bed, unable to sleep. I was thinking about a lot of things. My career, my mundane life, yada yada. But I was also thinking about the interaction I had with the other Steve just earlier. I was wondering to myself if it was the right decision to invite him over for dinner. I stood up and looked over the window. The neighbor's house was bright, as if all the lights were turned on. I looked at the clock. It was 3 a.m. All the other houses in the vicinity were dark as usual. Then momentarily, all the lights turned off. Stillness. The night continued on. Welcome, welcome. I prepared some pork chops with mashed potato and arugula salad. I placed the dishes on the dinner table. Steve and his wife were at the front door. Steve's wife looked like a typical woman in her early 30s. She was wearing a black overcoat with a red turtleneck underneath. Her slim hands were covered in white gloves that almost resembled surgical gloves. Fashion trends nowadays can be so subtle, I thought. She was not wearing any glasses, but her look was oddly similar to her husband's. They both looked like medical professionals, but without the warmth of a family doctor. You can keep the shoes on. I don't mind. The couple smiled at me and entered the house. Hello, my name is Steve. Nice to meet you. Instead of shaking my hand, the wife smiled again and nodded. She's a little quiet. Don't mind her. Here, we brought some food. From a side bag, the other Steve took out 3 black plastic containers. He laid them on the dinner table ever so gently, to the point where I wondered if there was jewelry inside. Once they were on the table, The neighbor stood there quietly, looking at the containers with a smile indicating how proud he was. Proud of what? Do you want to eat or have a glass of wine first? I have some vintage wine you might want to try. Here, take a look. As I was walking to the wine cellar, I felt a gaze behind me. I looked back. No, that's fine. Let's eat first. You must be famished. The other Steve's son. The intensity of the neighbor's look felt like a deja vu. I nodded. Sure, we can eat first. I'll serve the food. I guarantee you have not had this before. The neighbor looked at him with a big, warm smile. For the first time since meeting him, the neighbor seemed genuine, kind even. I could feel the enthusiasm radiating from him. I smiled back. Sure thing. The wife walked to the dinner table, her boots not making a sound as she took her steps. When she arrived at the dinner table, she looked intently at the containers and immediately, yet slowly, began to remove the lid one by one. I was ready to be blown away. Gold flake steak. But what lay in front of me was rather a disappointment compared to my expectation. The first dish was a brisket-type meat that seemed to have been slow-cooked for hours. The meat looked tender but seemed to have lost the shape of what it originally looked like. The second dish was some sort of stewed meat with raw onions on the side. The third dish was a sausage. A single piece of sausage that was boiled, not grilled. All in all, the food did not look too appetizing to me. Here, try them. I guarantee you have not tried this meat before. The other Steve repeated himself. I nodded awkwardly and sat down. I looked back at the neighbors. They were standing still, their eyes fixated on the brisket meat that was on my fork. I did not feel too great. Hey, you guys can sit down. Don't just stand there. The couple did not move an inch. They continued to stare at me. I took a bite. It tasted like meat. There was not much flavor, but it wasn't bad either. But as I was chewing, I noticed the couple was standing closer and closer to me, until they were right next to me, staring intently, passionately, deathly. I thought they were looking at the meat, but I was mistaken. They were looking at me, but not at my face. They were looking at my body, my flesh. The meat suddenly tasted rancid. I spit them by reflex. The couple was still looking at me, but this time I swear they were glaring. Their faces did not move, but their hands were shaking. Ever so slightly. So slightly. I did not know what came over me, but I suddenly yelled out, "Get out! I don't want you here!" The couple did not seem startled. They stood still. I ran towards the door. I swung the door open and pointed at the front porch. "Get the hell out of my house now!" The couple looked at one another, then nodded. Slowly but gracefully, they put the lids on the containers, then placed them back in the side bag. They stared at me once, for a long, excruciating 15 seconds. Then they began to walk, and walked out of the house. Once I saw that they went back to their house, I ran into the washroom and brushed my teeth vigorously. My instinct told me what was in those containers was something no human was ever supposed to taste. I had no evidence to support any of this, but I could not brush past the gut feeling that was enveloping me. That whole night I tumbled around, thoughts racing in my mind. Do I call the police about this? But where was the proof? I did not know what the right solution was, and I felt so alone, so alone. In the midst of the night, I peered at the neighbor's house. It was dark tonight, dark like any other house. This gave me a little comfort that maybe I was just imagining things, that today was just an odd day. Suddenly the lights flashed in the house, blinking, twice, then darkness, then silence. It was a warm summer day when I first set foot in the old, abandoned house on the edge of town. I had always been curious about the place, with its peeling paint, broken windows, and overgrown yard. It was said to be haunted, and I had heard all sorts of creepy stories about the strange noises that came from the house at night, the ghostly apparitions that could be seen through the windows, and the feeling of dread that seemed to hang in the air. I wasn't sure what to expect when I entered the house, but I was certainly prepared for anything. I had a flashlight, a camera, and a sense of adventure. I was determined to uncover the truth about this creepy old place no matter what it took. As I stepped inside, I was immediately struck by how dark and quiet the house was. The only sound came from my footsteps as I made my way from room to room. The furniture was covered in a thick layer of dust, and cobwebs hung from the ceiling. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I realized that no one had lived in this house for years. It was as I was exploring the upstairs of the house that I heard the first strange noise. It was a low, mournful groan, like the wind blowing through a narrow alley. At first I tried to tell myself that it was just the wind, but as the groaning grew louder and more persistent, I realized that it was something more sinister. I shone my flashlight in the direction of the sound, but there was nothing there. I continued to explore the rest of the house, trying to ignore the growing sense of unease that was settling in my chest. Every time I turned a corner, I expected to see something frightening, but there was never anything there. And then, as I was about to leave the house, I saw something that made me wish I had never entered the old, abandoned house in the first place. In one of the rooms, there was a small wooden door that looked like it led to a closet or a small storage room. I cautiously approached the door, wondering what I would find on the other side. I reached for the doorknob and was about to open it when I heard a voice whisper in my ear, "Don't go in there." I jumped back, my heart racing, but there was no one there. I looked around the room, but there was still no sign of anyone. I was alone in the house, and yet I had heard a voice. I was about to leave the house when I realized that I had left my camera in the room with the door. I didn't want to leave without it, so I reluctantly returned to the room. I hesitated for a moment, but then I reached for the doorknob and opened the door. The room was pitch black and I could barely make out the shapes of the things inside. I reached for my flashlight, and as I did, I heard the voice again. "Don't go in there." I turned to run, but my feet wouldn't move. I was frozen in place, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. I heard a rustling sound, and then I saw a pair of glowing eyes in the darkness. I don't remember what happened after that. All I know is that I woke up outside the house, with no memory of how I got there. I never went back to the old abandoned house on the edge of town, and I never told anyone what I saw in that small wooden room. Years have passed, and I still think about that haunted house. I wonder what was in that room, and what the voice was trying to tell me. I sometimes hear the groaning sound in my dreams, and I see the glowing eyes in the darkness, and I know that I will never forget the fear that I felt in that old, abandoned house. I don't remember the exact moment it all started happening, but I remember the first time I noticed. I'm not a fan of the dark. Sure, laugh all you want at the 25-year-old man being afraid of the dark, but it is what it is. So I'm pretty much always home before sundown. I work the morning and or day shift happily since I'm always in bed by 11:30 tops. I don't usually wake up during the night, but lately I had been getting up almost every night. Not a big deal, right? I'd just get a glass of water or something and fall back asleep. Then I heard it. I remember I didn't even think much of it too. Dogs. Just a bunch of dogs barking. It sounded like every dog in the neighborhood, to be honest. It had to have been over 30, and it sounded like they were coming from every yard. Then, just as suddenly, they all stopped. 1 minute to the next, every dog stopped their incessant barking and howling, and the entire neighborhood was silent again. I turned on the hall lights and went to the living room to check on Pickles. Yes, I named him after Pickle Rick. And he was curled up on the sofa. I didn't hear any barking inside my house, which is weird, right? What dog doesn't just join in on that kind of frenzy? I just went back to sleep and didn't think much of it. Not until the barking woke me up again, and again the next night, and again after that. I wasn't too angry about it, just confused. It became a bit of a red flag that next Saturday. I took Pickles with me on a jog after work around the neighborhood, and ran into Brock, the guy who lives in the house behind me. "Hey man, hey Pickles." He grinned down at my dog. He liked corgis and sometimes let Pickles into his yard to play with his too. "What's up, Brock?" I said, motioning that it was okay for him to give Pickles a little attention. "Nothing much, thankfully. Almost done fixing up the room for the twins." "Nice, nice. Hopefully your granddaughters don't get spooked with all the barking lately," I commented. "What do you mean?" "You know, all the barking at night. Your dogs definitely aren't innocent, but it's no biggie," I joked. "My dogs don't bark at night. They sleep in the bedroom with me and Jane. We've never had a barking problem." His lips were a firm line, obviously not appreciating my accusations or whatever. All right. I raised my hands in surrender. Maybe your boys are innocent, but they must be some of the only ones. The barking's woken me up for like a week already. Brock gave me a once-over, his eyes boring into me with that kind of intensity only veterans can manage. You know, that dead-eyed look where it feels like they're stripping you and checking for bombs. "I haven't heard any barking, son. You take care," he muttered, continuing his walk and brushing past me. There's no way a dude with his history wouldn't be a light sleeper, so if he hadn't been woken up, how was I? I slept through a twister back when I lived down in Omaha. He could have been messing with me. He's a weird guy like that. Still, it left me unnerved. I don't work the next day, so I decided to stay up late for a little WWE marathon. I stayed on the sofa, Pickles nuzzled in my lap and a cold one in hand, as the sun kept dripping closer and closer to the horizon. I turned on the lamp on the end table. The warm, yellow glow was good enough to keep the room from being too dark. I was taking turns scrolling on my phone and watching takedowns on my TV when the barking started again. God, it was even louder than it had been last night, and I rolled my shoulders in discomfort. I peered down at my phone and noted the time, 2:37 a.m. By 2:38, the barking stopped. Pickles hadn't moved off my lap, much less howled along. "How did you not hear that?" I murmured, giving his head a little pat. He licked my hand. I sat him down on the cushion beside me and went to turn on the room light. I pushed the blinds apart to sneak a look outside, maybe see some dogs running around. Nothing. The neighborhood was empty, not a living soul in sight. Weird. I went to sleep a little while later. This cycle of waking up at night kept dragging on, and each time I found it harder and harder to fall back asleep. It just felt off, like all of it was extra dodgy, because I tried to casually mention the loud barking to a few more neighbors, and each time, no one even knew what I was talking about. I obviously couldn't ask him, but I feel even Pickles would have looked at me like I had 3 heads if I did. I started checking my phone every time that godforsaken barking woke me up, and each time it began at 2:37 in the morning and stopped at the exact second the clock hit 2:38. The next day I had off work. I decided I'd wait at my window to see if any dogs come out. I figured they'd had to be nearby since the racket was just so close and loud. At 2:36, I muted my TV and held the blinds open again. The minute hand chugged on, and like clockwork, the first dog began howling. With a sound that intense, you'd think it was sitting in my front yard, but no. Just like the last time I had checked, the neighborhood was deserted, but the noise was getting ridiculous. The gruff barking and the piercing howls made my skin prickle. If I were in a movie, the hair would stand on the back of my neck or something. 2:38, and it all came to a halt. I sighed and went to grab the melatonin I had bought and headed for bed. It took what felt like 2 hours to get to sleep. I tried this again, but using my phone to record and send to my group chat, just so I didn't feel crazy anymore. I started recording at 2:37, right after the first dog went off. And this is when the second, third red flag hit me. The street light flickered abruptly and died, making my view outside pitch black. I grimaced, but stayed at the window. As soon as I stopped recording, my phone flashed white and then turned off. It took like 10 minutes to get it on again, and when I did, the video was just gone. Not in my gallery, not in my trash. Nowhere. It was like the video never existed. I spent the next night at my friend Patrick's house. I think at this point it was muscle memory or instinct or something, because I jerked awake at 2:37 anyway. I heard a single dog howl, and that was it, but nothing as close or loud like it was at my house. I finally got a real good sleep for the first time in half a month, and I really didn't want to leave, but I had to go back for pickles. Plus, I still had a mortgage, so... Like you'd all expect, it happened again the very next night, 2:37 on the dot. I felt like I was alone in hell. No one else in my neighborhood was hearing this. I couldn't catch it on camera, and the streetlight hadn't been fixed, so I wasn't going to leave the house and check it out. Stuff really hit the fan when I heard a bang at my door. It sounded like someone, or something, rammed itself against the door. Just once, but that alone kept me up the rest of the night. The next night, amidst the screeching and howling and barking and awfulness of it all, I heard scratches, both at my front and back door, like the dogs were trying to get in. I didn't sleep that night either. My eyes were always bloodshot, the bags under them such a deep brown that they made my eyes look even more sunken in. I'd never had such dark bags. It looked like my face got all hyperpigmented. I couldn't be asked to keep up with taking care of myself because I always felt exhausted. I got written up at work for sleeping on the job, but I could only find solace in quick naps during the day. I felt the drag taking its toll over me so quickly. Even my bones felt sore and tired, but the closer to 2:37 a.m., it was like someone shot me up with straight caffeine. It just kept getting louder and louder and louder. That 1 minute just made every day feel like torture. My hair started falling out. I remember I couldn't even bring myself to feel sad when I saw the clump of black curls piled up on the shower drain. I lost my appetite, and now my clothes hang off my body unattractively. I couldn't bring myself to care. The only thing on my mind, 24 hours a day, was that 1 minute where piercing dog barking and howls would flood my ears, now accompanied with the sounds of dogs whining and trying to force their way into my house. 2 nights ago was the worst one. I kept thinking it couldn't get worse, and yet it did. Every night. 2:37. It sounded like they were in my walls, inside my house. I laid there staring at my ceiling with my eyes glazed over. The dim brightness from the wall plug-in light kept me from being engulfed in the darkness. But it almost didn't matter. The scratching was relentless. It sounded like sharp claws were close to breaking open the drywall right behind me. My head shook a bit, like the wall was pushing against the frame, and I choked out a sob. Then my back door swung open. I could hear the handle smack right into the wall with a cracking sound. God, the noise. It sounded like the dogs were right in my ear, so loud I couldn't even hear the different barks and howls. Like it was all just one buzzing sound bouncing around in my skull. Somehow I heard nails, or claws, scraping against my floor, and I squeezed my eyes shut. They got in. It had to be at least 10 different dogs running around in my house, towards my bedroom. "Get out!" I gasped, eyes still firmly shut. Get out of my house! Get out of my house!" I was screaming at the top of my lungs. The words stung my throat like bile from how much force I put into them. 2:38. Silence. Pickles. I bolted out of bed, stumbling over the blankets until I managed to scramble into the living room. He was awake and okay, but he looked at me with a little tilt in his head, like he was confused why I was yelling and running to him. I took sharp, shaky breaths until it didn't hurt to inhale anymore. I turned towards the back door, and then I had to throw up. It was open. The handle had broken into the wall, leaving a cracked hole where it smashed into it. There were a few deep scratches, claw marks on my floor, and some dirt. I kept Pickle's claws trimmed, so it wasn't my dog for sure. I scooped him into my arms and held him tight to my chest, the tremors running through me, feeling like a seizure. I slowly made my way to the door and closed it. I tried to lock it, but the handle was broken. I pushed a chair in front of it and went to my room, Pickles still in my arms. I locked the bedroom door and put him on the bed. I wasn't going to be able to sleep, but he still could. Yesterday I called a locksmith to replace the handle, and I pointedly ignored the claw marks, especially the 4 thin lines on the outside of my bedroom door. I also ignored the warped look in my walls, like something was close to ripping them apart. Last night, I got the gun out of my safe and put it on the pillow beside me. I didn't even bother to sleep. I just spent the entire night with my knees up to my chest, eyes open and staring at nothing. I could hear Pickles snoring softly at the foot of my bed. My mom always told me it was dirty to have a dog in your bed, especially one that sheds like he does, but I didn't care anymore. He needed to be with me. 2:36. I let out a shaky breath, my mind racing. I'd have to shoot a dog. I've never even used a gun on anything but bottles in the backyard at my brother's house. I'd probably have to shoot more than one. There'd be a lot of blood in my bedroom. Pickles is gonna freak out. He's never even heard a gunshot. 2:37. A lone howl sounded outside my window, and I gripped the gun tightly, hot tears slipping from my eyes. The barking was insufferable, right there in my ears. There was growling, a rabid and hungry noise that I could feel right behind me. The scratching started again. I could hear them in the walls, seconds from breaking out. The door blew open too, the hinges popping off easily. The footsteps were heavy and fast, and an innumerable amount of claws were at my bedroom door. I could hear the thin wood waning under the weight. The barking was in my head. I could feel slobbering and saliva hitting the sides of my face, and I gasped out a sharp cry. My nightlight went out. I was trapped in the blackness, and I felt my stomach drop. I was confined, the space around me closing in, keeping me trapped in a tightening space where I was lost. I couldn't even hear the dogs anymore. It was a steady ring in my ears, so painful it felt like blood was going to start trickling out any second. I grabbed my phone off my lap and turned the flashlight on. The dog in front of me was a monster. It stood over my legs with long, black, matted fur and a long, thin snout. It was big enough it could have been a wolf, but it was unmistakably a dog. Its ears were pointed, the snarl on its face inches from mine. I felt a wet drop of its drool land on my skin. The expression on its face was enough to kill. I could feel my entire body shaking as I stared into its red eyes. The eyes were burned into the back of my brain, red eyes brighter than flames, but they flickered the same way. The smell of it was foul, so bad I could feel my insides churning. It stank like a corpse, like a dead animal left to rot in the summer sun. It barked right in my face, sending an assault of thick and sticky drool all over my face, and the simmering heat of its breath singed my nose. The creak of the springs in my mattress as it leaned forward, closer, was gut-wrenching. It barked again, and the sheer power in its bark made my ears ring. I felt dizzy just listening to the sound, an ear-splitting burst that was encouraged by the flurry of other dogs still howling away. It opened its snout wider, sharp white teeth glistening in the light of my phone. I was done for. I knew this beast of a dog was going to snap my neck in two, and 2:38. My flashlight went out. The smell, the sound, the weight of it over me was gone. I gasped in short, painful breaths, a deep stitch forming in my side. I was sweating badly, my sheets and clothes practically glued to my skin. I turned on my flashlight again and pried my fingers off the gun. I was so afraid I didn't even think to use it. I forgot it, honestly. I shined my light in my room, noting the chips in my walls, the holes, the scratches on the floor and on my door, which hung open ominously. I turned the light towards the foot of my bed. "Pickles?" I croaked, nudging him with a toe. He didn't move. "Pickles?" I fell, getting out of bed, my legs about as solid as jello. I smacked my wall until I hit the light switch and trembled all the way over to my dog. "Pickles?" I whispered, touching his soft fur with delicate hands. I picked him up and felt every nerve in my body scream in pain when his neck rolled loosely. Deep, bloody teeth holes all over it. I stumbled over my own feet and promptly threw up, the burn in my throat barely rivaling the heat from my tears. I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. Pickles is gone. I buried him in the backyard this afternoon, and now I'm just so empty. I should have done something different, but what? What can I even do? My best friend is gone. I know what got him. And I know it's coming back tonight.